Good evening. Authorities in Germany are working on an extradition request for former Steinhoff boss Markus Jooste. Jooste is wanted in Germany on 2 counts of fraud that could put him behind bars for up to 3 years. 2 months ago, a regional court in Oldenburg issued a warrant of arrest against Jooste after he failed to appear for the start of his fraud trial. Jooste lost his appeal against the warrant last month. For the latest on this, we are now joined by legal analyst Ulrich Roux, and he joins us via our video link. Ulrich, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Of course, we had seen in the past that there was indeed that warrant of arrest for Markus Jooste. They had asked him to appear before the courts for a pre-trial on those 2 charges of fraud. We kind of expected this, didn't we?
Yes, definitely. He was summoned to appear in the German court on charges of fraud, and he failed to appear. And the next logical step that one could have expected was for a warrant to be issued for him. He then lodged an appeal against the issuing of that warrant, which was dismissed. And accordingly, he's a wanted person in Germany on charges of fraud. So now the next step is for the German authorities to lodge an extradition application in an attempt to bring him before court.
And what does that extradition policy look like between the 2 countries? I know that South Africa and Germany are indeed both a part of the European Extradition Convention. So how will that facilitation look like in bringing Markus Jooste before the German courts?
Well, the difficulty is that Germany has a very firm stance that they will not extradite any German citizens to a non-EU country. So, for instance, if there was a German national who was wanted in South Africa on criminal charges, and our authorities requested the German authorities to extradite that person to South Africa, then they would never extradite that person, and they would not cooperate in bringing that person before a South African court. So, essentially, the South African authorities, would now have to do the German authorities a big favor and perform a big favor, whereas it will not be reciprocated by the German authorities to South Africa. So certainly I think, there would be some serious negotiations between the 2 countries in order to attempt to find some form of mutual legal assistance in bringing Markus Jooste before the German courts. The other avenue which they can follow is, of course, to issue an Interpol red notice for Markus Jooste, so that if he is detained at a port of entry or exit out of the country, then that red notice will be flagged and could be brought before the German courts in such a manner. But one would expect first for the countries to now enter into negotiations and determine whether there will indeed be an extradition application lodged, whereby they will be seeking to extradite him from South Africa to Germany in order to face those charges.
And how long can a process of this nature take, especially with what you have just detailed for us, that this would have to be as if it's a favor to the Germans? How long will this process actually take?
Well, they need to follow the formal procedures now. They need to firstly compile a proper extradition application, which will be served on the South African authorities, and then for the South African authorities to then consider that and consider whether there will be a South African arrest warrant issued for Markus Jooste to bring him before court in South Africa. And then he will, of course, be granted an opportunity to oppose such an extradition to Germany and to place his version on the record in South Africa. So it all depends on how swiftly the German authorities will, put together that extradition application. But one could expect certainly before the end of this year for that application to be launched and to be served on South Africa, and for the South African authorities then to take a decision on whether they will be cooperating with the German authorities in an attempt to extradite him to Germany.
And, is this the only option that German authorities can take in this matter, trying to haul Markus Jooste before German courts? Are there other steps that they can take, or is this the only one so far for this matter, for him to finally answer to his fraud cases?
Well, as I said, firstly, it is the extradition process, which would be negotiations between the two countries in an attempt to bring him before the German court. But secondly, they could also apply for an international warrant of arrest to be issued for him via Interpol, a so-called red notice. And that red notice will then be circulated in an attempt to arrest Markus Jooste on that warrant to bring him before court in Germany. Such a red notice is, of course, valid throughout the world, and should he ever intend to travel, may enter or exit the port of entry in South Africa or anywhere else, and that warrant will be activated. So that would be a secondary step that they would take. They would first try and have him extradited through mutual legal assistance, and secondly, attempt to have an Interpol red notice issued for him.
And should Markus Jooste, indeed see this process get underway, and he becomes extradited to Germany, perhaps maybe if you can just give us a bit of insight, what will this mean for Markus Jooste and the allegations leveled against him in South Africa? If he is to be arrested in Germany, will it benefit the South African authorities for the crimes he's committed in South Africa?
Well, not necessarily. Remember that he's facing charges in Germany of having committed a crime in Germany, and in terms of their Criminal Procedure Act and their laws and regulations. So should he be extradited to Germany and should he face a criminal trial there, it would not necessarily have an impact on proceedings that could be launched against him in South Africa. Of course, there's been no arrest effected in South Africa. To my knowledge, there's been no criminal charges laid as well. And one would have to wait and see whether the South African authorities do indeed take any steps in order to make criminal charges and prosecute Markus Jooste and whoever else is involved in this fraud that was committed. But the two processes will run independently of each other, and the through mutual legal assistance, the German authorities can assist the South African authorities. But the fact that he could be prosecuted in Germany will not necessarily have an effect on any proceedings against him in South Africa.
And Ulrich, we know that he is indeed charged with 2 counts of fraud in Germany. And, you have just detailed to us how an extradition process would look like for South Africa. And when it comes to the actual trial, should he, be extradited to Germany, and then we'll finally see this matter get underway, how long, can we expect that court matter to sit for? And, when it comes to him being put behind bars, I know that there are some reports that are saying we can see him being behind bars for 3 years. Is that the only time frame we can see this matter take place? Is it a 3-year period should he be found guilty?
Well, those are the reports that have come from Germany, that he could face up to 3 years jail time should he be convicted of the charges in Germany. Whereas in South Africa, if he is charged with fraud, extensive fraud ranging into the billions of rands, then he could face a minimum sentence of 15 years imprisonment should he be convicted in South Africa. His sentencing will fall within the confines of the minimum Sentencing Act, which is applicable for any fraud or theft committed of an amount of 500,000 rand or more. So certainly it seems as if the sentence that could be imposed on him in South Africa, if ever there were charges laid against him and he was convicted, would be much heftier than the sentence that could be imposed upon him in Germany. As for how long the proceedings in Germany will take, one would have to wait and see, the extent of the evidence which they intend presenting in court during that trial, as well as nominating witness they intend on calling. First step, of course, is to get into Germany either through Interpol red notice or through extradition. And once he's there, to then proceed with the trial as swiftly as possible, I'm sure. Will be the goal of the German authorities.
All right, Ulrich, thank you so much for your time and your contributions. That is Ulrich Roux. He is a legal analyst there, talking about the issue of Markus Jooste and, of course, that extradition process, which German authorities are now looking into, saying that it's either an extradition or maybe an Interpol red notice.